If you don't believe me, watch this. Marvel's right about its audience being sexist. However, they're wrong about what that means. Women typically like stories in which the protagonist is an exceptional individual going against insurmountable odds. They don't need changing. A corrupt system or another individual in the story needs to change. Think Aaron Brockovich. Men like stories in which the character displays some type of deficiency, and it's their personal growth that they find engaging. The movies Major League and A League of Their Own came out at roughly the same time. In the movie Major League, the drama revolves around them becoming a better ball team, and each player has a personal challenge that they have to overcome in order to do that. In A League of Their Own, they're already a good ball team. The drama revolves around convincing society, and Tom Hanks specifically, that they belong to be there. Neither type of story is better or worse than the other, but Marvel is making a genre targeted to men using a female-style protagonist, and that's why they don't resonate. If you don't believe me, watch this. These are, of course, generalizations and don't apply to everyone. And a well-written, imaginative movie is gonna be a good movie, regardless of what kind of character leads it. These just happen to be the character types that each gender gravitates towards the most. Despite what Marvel may tell you, it has nothing to do with the sex of the character, but the archetype instead that appeals to different sexes. So a movie doesn't have to have a female character with the female archetype to be successful. The movie Rudy is a prime example of this. It's a mainstay on female networks. He's undersized and too small to play football. He doesn't become a better football player in the movie, but it's his grit and determination that changes everyone around him. Everyone's better off for having known Rudy. Even though the character is male, and the subject is about football, something that males typically find more enjoyable, the movie targets better to females because it's a character type that females find more enjoyable. On the flip side, you have Xena Warrior Princess, that is a show that was geared towards men, that has a female protagonist that was extremely successful. If you don't believe me, watch this. I refuse to buy into Disney's narrative that the reason why the Marvels is failing is because their audience will not support a female protagonist. And the reason why I believe this? Xena Warrior Princess. Long before the Hunger Games, Lucy Lawless starred as a legit action hero in a series that quickly became a cult classic. In fact, the character is so beloved that if she were to show up at a Comic-Con today, there would be a line out the door. And the kicker? Although it was never openly expressed on TV because it was the 90s, there was clearly a relationship going on between her and her companion, Gabrielle. And in fact, many TV sites have listed their love story as one of the greatest of all time. People weren't less homophobic, racist, and sexist in the 90s. They were more so. That shows that a character like that can be loved and succeed in this space. So stop writing excuses and start writing better characters. If you don't believe me, watch this. So basically, she checks all the boxes that Disney's really trying to push these days. And people still loved her, so it's not that. The difference is that she's the type of character that male audiences like. And her story arc is one of redemption. And she's not perfect. She still struggles with the demons that let her fall in the first place. And even though Gabrielle is a weaker fighter, it's her virtues and her morals that Xena needs in order to be a better person. They complement each other. Each character serves a purpose. And both characters were loved by the male audience that watched the show. What Disney has done, though, is essentially combine the two characters into one perfect character that doesn't need anyone. And males don't find that engaging. We don't. What we're having is that the women that are being put in charge of these movies that are geared towards men don't understand the male audience. And they expect the male audience that they're making the movies for to like the same characters that they like. And when they don't, they take it as a personal attack that men don't like women. No, men and women just value different things in storytelling. I mean, you wouldn't have the guys from Barstool Sports write romantic comedies. But if they did, and the movie came out, and girls said, we didn't like it, there was too much bro culture in it, you wouldn't turn around and call the women that didn't want to see it sexist. You wouldn't. If you don't believe me, watch this. Marvel's right about sexism destroying their movies, but they're wrong about who's doing it. They'd have you believe it's a lack of support from their male audience that's causing the downturn. However, that's not how oppression really works. Men don't owe women support automatically. Oppression would be us telling you you have no right writing, directing, or making these movies. You're allowed to make movies. It's not oppression for me to not spend my money on products that I don't want to see. I firmly believe that women are fully capable of writing and directing films that the male audience wants to see. However, right now, they don't care. They're sexist. They've been taught to believe that they should write whatever kind of movie they want, and if men don't like it, well, then they're the problem. And it'd be fine if it was just for y'all, but y'all don't want to watch it either. Women don't want to see this. So even the genres that you don't want to watch have to be made with your perspective first. That's the oppression. If you don't believe me, watch this. Now, I don't really think the making of these movies is oppressing men. That's not how oppression works either. Not everything has to be made from the male perspective. However, I do think that they're ignoring men, and in a time period in which representation is so important, the audience that actually comes to see the movie is vastly unrepresented. And the examples that we do have are generic, weak, and solely exist to make the other characters in the story look better. They turned the actual fans of the MCU into the villains in She-Hulk. I believe there's a certain group of women now that thinks that the female perspective needs to be accounted for at all times in every genre, even those that aren't targeted to women. They created all these tests to determine whether or not a female character is actually necessary to the plot. And the underlying tone to that is that each female character needs to be evolved and have their own character arc. Otherwise, they're just a useless plot point. And it's just a further example of chauvinism and sexism and treating women like objects. However, in an effort to accommodate this female perspective, we've turned our back on the target audience. If you don't believe me, watch this. Kelly Sue DeConnick came up with the sexy lamp test, which states if a female character can be replaced by a sexy lamp, then she isn't an established character. And she was right. For a long time, female characters were underdeveloped, giving birth to the term manic pixie dream girl. However, now we're finding that many of the male characters in both Marvel and Disney wouldn't even pass the sexy lamp test themselves. Some of which are the title characters in the movies. They do nothing to advance the plot and exist only to make the female character look better. And even the good guys are conglomerates of toxic masculinity and chauvinism that need to be put in their place by the female characters at all times. What's more manic pixie dream girl than Prince Eric in the remake of The Little Mermaid? Male characters deserve the same respect that you demand we give female characters. Stop making them generic, flat, and useless. If you don't believe me, watch this. I don't actually have a problem with generic characters. They exist in all genres. Every story type has them. The generic chauvinist man is the manic pixie dream girl of female-led projects. And he exists simply for that moment in which the female character gets to flip the script on him. And it's so cliche and so tired, and the character is so one-dimensional, and I don't have a problem with them. My problem is that if you're going to tell me that every female character needs to be fully developed, then you really need to give the same respect to every male character in reverse, and they're not right now. What's worse is they're taking established male characters and using them to boost the credibility of the new female characters by making them flawed or in some cases entirely inept. This would be like writing a story in which a young hotshot male lawyer was placed in Ruth Bader Ginsburg's office, and he had to somehow teach her how law was actually practiced these days. Because even though she had 30 years of experience and was incredibly successful, he knew more than her. And she's so inept, it's a wonder she even passed the bar. If you don't believe me, watch this. In a world where Disney was bought out by Andrew Tate, coming this summer, Ginsburg. You loved her as a Supreme Court justice. You loved her as a civil rights activist. And now you'll love her even more as she struggles to understand the basic concepts of law. She thought she knew everything about life until he walked in. Watch as this hero for an entire generation gets belittled and condescendingly berated by a man third her age. You'll laugh, you'll cry, as our actual hero... did I just say that out loud? Watch as he teaches her basic concepts of courtroom procedures that even a first-year law student should know. Is this unrealistic? Probably. Is it an iconoclast? Definitely. Is this what you thought you would see when you bought the tickets? Almost assuredly not. But hey, she's a stuck-up bitch and she has it coming. If you don't believe me, watch this. Do you see how that kind of storyline is somewhat condescending? You wouldn't put up with any of this, but you expect me to not only put up with it, but to also like it. And maybe you're right. Maybe men only want to see men. And you know what? Maybe cis men only want to see cis men. But isn't that kind of the point of having all these diverse characters, was you're trying to appeal to different audiences? And so in essence, you're saying that those audience only want to come see the movies if they see characters that are like themselves? How is that diversity? But when a cis male wants to see characters that represent him in a positive light, that's sexism and homophobia and racism. It seems like a weird double standards. I mean, if inclusion is so important, it's so important to be inclusive, why are we excluding the majority of the audience? That seems counterintuitive to me. And at this point, like, I understand you did it a few times. It came back and you're like, oh, they didn't like that. But it's your response that's gotten ridiculous. If you don't believe me, watch this. Every time one of these Disney projects fell, they always blame it on racist, homophobic, sexist men. And I don't know if they really are racist, homophobic, and sexist, but for the sake of the argument, let's say that they are. But the irony is, that's who wants to see the movies. I'm no business major, but it just seems like if you know that's your target audience, why are you intentionally making movies that piss them off? I'm not saying you have to make a racist movie, but if you're right about them being all three, why would you make a movie in which the protagonists are the example of everything that they don't want? You have to know at this point. You're choosing to fail. I just find it funny that the fan base complains and they say, oh, well, you didn't like that? Well, you're really not going to like this, and just double down on everything that they're complaining about and then get shocked when they hate it more. If you don't believe me, watch this. Marvel movies need to be given back to the fans. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that plays in a Marvel movie or writes for one needs to be a true fan of Marvel Comics, but it certainly would help. You wouldn't have the guys from Barstool Sports start writing romantic comedies. Even though most of those guys are writers, and most of cinema is formulaic, something always gets lost in the translation when it's written by a disingenuous source. You know how cringe it feels whenever a 40-year-old man tries to write a story from a high school girl's perspective? That's what's happening right now in Marvel movies. What Disney should actually do is hire the YouTubers that they say are destroying the films to be consultants, because those are the guys who understand the culture. They're not hateful, they're concerned because they care about this stuff. You don't care about comics. You don't even understand them. Then you hire people to do these projects that understand them even less. If you don't believe me, watch this. I'm convinced that Disney's actually run by a bunch of cool kids from high school that hate nerd culture. They blame the movie's failing on 30 to 40-year-old white men. Well, guess what? That's your target audience. They say they don't want to watch your movie and list reasons why, and instead of addressing it, you just call them incels. I don't understand why on earth you would think a correct response is, I don't care what you have to think, because you're a dork that's into comic book movies that can't get laid. Well, who do you think's coming to see your movies? Because I can tell you, Disney, the guys that care look like the guys from The Big Bang. And that's who actually still showed up. The nerds you say are destroying the movie are the ones that are supporting it. But instead of making a movie for them, you make one that isn't, and then blame them for not liking it, like they owe you support because they're dorks and you're cooler than them. That's disgusting.